I find myself getting into the trap of bringing it up and trying to talk about it with people more than I'd really like to. But you have to focus on gratitude, I'd say, is the number one thing. Be grateful that you're alive, that you're able to speak. Focus on all those things that you had to be grateful for, and it helps you put the the unknowns and the pain and the fear from before out of your mind.
Welcome to Evening Rounds, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes in medicine. Tonight we have Dr. Kyle Cooper, an interventional radiologist here at Loma Linda University Health. 2 months ago, he was in a near-fatal cycling accident, and tonight he's talking to us about his road to recovery and how being a patient has impacted him as a physician taking care of patients. Well, Kyle, good evening.
Thank you.
We're really excited to have you here on our Evening Rounds podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
We have a lot to get into tonight. The first question, though, is how are you feeling?
Pretty good, to be honest. It's been quite a wild ride the last couple of months, and I would like to say I'm looking pretty back to normal, with the exception of my scar. And if I open my mouth, you can see I'm missing some teeth. But other than that, more or less back to normal. Some burning in my lips that just I don't know if ever's going to go away because I had some nerve stretch injury. And working on swallowing and speech. But other than that, my legs are strong as ever.
It's interesting. You chose words, I think, carefully there, wild ride. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into that. But for the audience, you sustained a pretty horrific bike accident. How long ago was that?
We're just over 2 months now. Yeah, it was August 26th.
Wow.
And I would say that I am lucky to be alive. I mean, it was all to the face, but the injury was pretty extensive, and there was a lot of bleeding involved. And so thanks to a lot of people who helped out, I'm back to speaking with you today.
Yeah, you got to see up close and personal what it's like to be a patient.
To be a patient at Loma Linda is a good experience. I would say that. I was taken very well care of from the second I hit the ER doors until the moment I got discharged. So, but it does give you an insight into some of the things that your patients may go through, like when is my doctor going to come see me? That's your whole point of the day. And if surgeon's around at the end of the day, that's hard for patients. And so I got to go through the same thing that they go through, and it gave me a new insight.
There's nothing like being a patient as a physician to understand your patients, right?
Yeah, for sure.
How did you get to where you are now? How did you actually pursue a career in medicine?
When I was growing up, I was always the math and science geek. And I also had a grandmother with COPD and a grandfather with peripheral arterial disease who ended up getting amputation. And in the last few years of their lives, I was a preteen and a teenager, and I spent my weekends with them because it was just me and my mom at home. And she had to work a lot. She worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our head. So I would spend time with them, and if she couldn't drive me there, then I would ride my bike there to take care of them.
How long of a bike was that for you?
It was 40 miles.
40 miles.
Yeah. So my mom still talks about, you have no idea how much fear it took for me to put aside to let you ride 40 miles.
Yeah.
I presume you were in a warm weather climate?
No, Michigan.
So you were biking 40 miles in the snow?
No, it wasn't. Let's say spring, summer, and fall, although it's all kind of cold there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was just, you were totally okay with that as a teen?
It was, I didn't have a lot of friends, and I really liked taking care of my grandparents, and they were Scottish, and I loved hearing their accent and hearing their stories, and so it was worth it for me to spend that time with them, and that's time I cherish now. And I went with them to their doctor's appointments occasionally, and I really got a look at what it takes to take care of people with chronic illness, and it gave me a love for medicine. And then I'm also really competitive, and it's a hard field to get into, and so let's aim for the top.
How was that journey? So you were working, your mom was obviously working very hard. How did that go, deciding, okay, I'm going to make this big jump into med school?
I set my mind on it in high school, and I'm kind of like a dog with a stick. I don't let go. So it was challenging. I went to a Christian liberal arts college, and I started as a junior. because I had a bunch of credits from high school. I went at night. I went on during summers, and so I had 66 credits. And then that was an interesting journey because you enter as a junior and everybody else who's entering as a freshman. So the juniors all have their friends and you don't. So I just kind of focused on my studies, and I worked as a manager at McDonald's at night to pay for room and board, and got into med school. After my second attempt, that was also hard. I had not been told no up until that point, and I didn't get in my first time. And so that was a good time to look in the mirror and say, okay, is this really what you want?
So I was waitlisted.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about how your first interview went.
Yeah.
Knowing from my perspective how awful my interview went.
It's looking back at it, it's kind of comical, to be honest.
Why?
So, I interviewed at Northwestern in Chicago, which I had no idea what a great school that was. I have no mentors that were in medicine, and so I didn't really know the gift that interview really was for me. And it was a panel interview. So there were like 3 or 4 faculty, and there were 2 or 3 applicants all at one table. And so they would ask you, if you could be any person in history, who would it be? And so they would ask person next to you, and then they would ask you. Sometimes you get to go first. Well, so the person next to me would say my answer, and then I would have to figure out what to say. And the other thing is I didn't have an answer for why do you want to be a doctor, which is such a basic question that I should have known the answer to. It went poorly. But the thing is when you get, when a roadblock is put in, one door closes, another opens, let's just say that. So I went back and I made myself a much better candidate.
Did it become more clear why you wanted to be a doctor?
Yeah.
At that point?
Well, I spent a lot of time formulating the answer to that question for next year's interviews.
And what was that answer?
It's because ultimately I feel like if you have the ability to care for people without necessarily being grossed out or turned off by when they're at their absolute worst, and you have the intellect and the perseverance to do that, then it's almost like that's your calling, I would say.
Well, it sounds like determination may be your middle name. Would you call yourself a determined or competitive individual?
I think both of those words are pretty apt. But driven is probably the word that's been used to describe me the most often. Yeah, I like setting a goal and seeing that goal through. That's and then once you get there, then you set the next goal. And so I've always enjoyed that. And, that's the same when it comes to cycling or being a doctor or being a program director.
I remember in second grade that I must have been a competitive individual because we were playing kickball at recess, and this girl kicked the ball over my head, and they won the game of kickball.
That's right.
And as a result, I took the ball and I threw it at her. And I got sent to the principal's office, and I was asked, well, why did you do that? And I said, well, because I lost. And then the principal said, well, yeah, but you need to be a better loser. And I said, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Unacceptable.
So I guess my question for you, Kyle, maybe it's not as sort of, appalling as what I did, but when did you first appreciate that you were a competitive individual?
I don't think I saw it as competitive until I first did my first bike race. I always saw it as being driven and trying to make a good life for my family, now my wife and kids. But when I started riding my bike, it all kind of came into focus when I started racing my bike, and that was in 2017. Got into a field, had never raced before, and as soon as the first person passed me, I said, "Oh no, that's not happening again," and chased him down. And so I made my way onto state, second in states that year, and it brought everything else into focus. Oh, okay, this is where this comes from.
And I've heard you say that bike is like a chess match for you. Why? How in the world is that?
Well, the thing is, nobody has unlimited matches, as we like to say in cycling, meaning you have a match book and you can only strike so many of them before it's empty. And I'm strong in sprints and I can outsprint most people. But if you try to outsprint every person that rides past you during a 1 hour race, you will be out of breath before you're halfway done. And so you have to, as people are riding by you, look at them in a very short amount of time and decide, okay, is that person threatening to me? Are they going to be able to stay away on their own? Do they have teammates in the field that are going to make it hard for us to bring that person back? There's a lot of those types of scenarios you have to run through your mind. And I hired a local coach, Brian McCulloch, from Big Wheel Coaching. He was a pro for 10 years. And I hired him basically, I said, I'm strong. I don't need you to make me stronger. I want you to teach me how to think like a racer. And that was the best 2 years of coaching I ever paid for.
So I got to take a couple steps back because we're already going down like on the podium at state championships.
Yeah.
And we heard that you rode 40 miles to your grandparents as a preteen teenager. And then I hear you're on state championship podiums, things like this. So, okay, we have a gap there. So has cycling always been a part of you growing up and then into medical school and then as an attending physician, or tell us a little more about that?
So the bike for me was my escape when I was young to, I lived in a town of 2,000 people and we were, it was cornfields. And if you wanted to go hang out with your friends, your parents might drive you, or they'd say, just hop on your bike and go to your friends. And that could be like miles away. It's okay. There's no, it's pretty safe. And so, I rode it to get around when I was a teenager, and then when I went to medical school, I rode it just as my commute tool. It was never competitive. It was just, part of staying fit. And then when I became a resident, I had gained weight in medical school with my first child. I got sympathy weight with my wife when she was pregnant, and I got up to 240 pounds. And during my internship, I really started ramping it up, and that was when I did my first fondo. It was called Pelotonia, and it was for raising money for cancer research at Ohio State, and riding with people who were training for that event. I realized, okay, these people are working and it's not that hard for me because I'm always on my bike. And I said, okay, maybe I'm pretty good at this. That experience then went on to, as a new attending, moving to Ann Arbor and realizing that there's actually a cycling team that was pretty visible riding by at the same time I would be riding after work. And I hopped in with them and they were the people that introduced me to racing. So it's always... There was never a time where I wasn't riding my bike at least 1 or 2 times a week. It's just always been part of my daily meditation, so to speak.
I love that. So it sounds like you had quite a weight loss journey then.
Yeah, I went from, it comes on slowly, it sneaks up on you. Yeah. 240 pounds is no joke when you're 5'6". And then, in my intern year, everybody thought I had cancer because I went down to 155 pounds in 1 year.
Oh, wow. In 1 year.
That was partially bike and partially having an app on my phone that allowed me to track my calories and having a internship where all the calories were posted on everything in the cafeteria. And so I just started punching in, okay, this many calories eaten and then this many minutes cycled, and it became like a game to me.
So what was because there's a lot of people that struggle with weight. When you were setting out your goals for that journey with the calories in, what was your weekly deficit or daily deficit or monthly deficit that you were trying to achieve?
Yeah, it was usually, a pound of weight is about 3,500 calorie deficit over a course of a week. And so if you're trying to lose it in a pound a week, which is a healthy speed to lose weight, unless you're extremely overweight, then, it'd be like 500 calorie deficit a day. So you have to figure out, okay, what's your basal metabolic rate? So how active are you on a daily basis? And then, okay, how many calories are you burning on the bike? And then how many calories are you eating? And you have to be realistic about the fact that there's some error in all of those measurements. So I would always err on the side of maybe being a little hungrier and having a few less calories. But you don't want to overdo that, or you're just going to be hungry and you're going to overeat later. Or your body's going to say, uh-oh, you're not feeding me, and it's going to stop burning calories the way that it would normally. And so, like I said, all that became kind of a game to me. And like I said, I like to win.
You started out this podcast by saying you were a numbers nerd, and now I really believe you because
no idea.
That sounds like an incredible game to play with yourself. So when you're like eating, like contemplating, do I eat that muffin or that hard-boiled egg? You literally see those numbers in your mind.
I do. And it's based on, okay, what is my expected workout for the day? So I had a coach for a number of years. Now I coach myself. I have a 2-hour workout plan for this afternoon. I know that's going to be, 1,200 kilojoules, and that's roughly 1,200 calories. So that gives me an idea how much can still go in.
Versus a very busy day being a doctor and maybe not getting on your bike, for instance, and so your daily intake needs to be dialed down?
You do have to be careful because if you're on call, you may have a workout planned, but the universe may have something else planned for you.
Are you looking at them as all being equal? I mean, a calorie is a calorie. Are you looking at protein intake for workouts or fat or carbs, or do you look at the breakdown of the calories?
So it's true that a calorie is a calorie, but the speed at which it's going to be broken down is different. You have to draw the line somewhere as far as how much mental space you can devote to something. And so,
Yeah, exactly.
no, to me, I'll just eat a piece of cake if I want to eat a piece of cake.
Good for you.
But I know how many calories are in that cake. And no, it's I try to eat healthy, but most people will tell you I'm the one with an order from McDonald's for breakfast on the day of a race. It's ultimately, like I said, you can't devote all of your attention to any one thing, and so that's where I draw the line as far as macronutrients. And
Feels like McDonald's has been a big part of your story.
yeah, that's part of why I like that food. Is that it taught me how to work with others, work with people. Let's just say with varying degrees of education, varying degrees of motivation to be there, and it taught me leadership skills that I still use today.
Did I hear it correctly? You were a manager at McDonald's?
Yeah, I started off at the bottom of the food chain, and I just worked my way up, and over time, I was one of the closing managers. It was a fun job, to be honest. I actually thought about becoming a owner of a franchise. My wife still talks about that. She says, you were saying you wanted to be a franchise McDonald owner, and I still wanted to marry you, but I'm glad you change your mind, chose something different.
I feel like a franchise owner is built for the numbers game, just like you are. So it's really interesting to hear you say that. But it also is interesting to hear that it sounds like your wife has been a really big piece of your journey and of your healing journey, especially recently, but of your journey. You guys met in high school?
Yeah, I was 16, she was 15. We met at one of my, associates. We weren't super close friends, but from a football team, and we also were in the same youth group. And he invited everybody for the youth group over to his house for his birthday party. I came with one girl who I was interested in. She left with somebody else, and I left with my wife. We met around the fire, and we've been together ever since. It's been 22 years now.
Love that.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit more about the accident. The details of the accident, I am interested in hearing. I also would like to hear from you, how has the accident impacted you personally, both on a humanistic level and then professionally as well?
Well, some of the details are never going to be known. Unfortunately, I didn't have a camera on. There was no camera that showed exactly where the crash happened. But I was riding after a normal day. I typically will close out a day with a ride. Sometimes it's straight home. Sometimes it's, an hour or two loop to get in the exercise that I need. And that day I was doing endurance zone. It was like an hour and a half endurance. And I rode over on Panorama Point in Redlands and woke up on the ground there. There's at least 2 minutes that are missing from my memory as far as what exactly happened. But yeah, woke up in a pool of blood and with somebody going the other direction, getting out of their car and asking me, "Are you all right?" And as I, lifted my face up, it was very obvious I was not. And she said, "You're not all right. Stop." And she turned out to be this is Heather McVeigh. She's a nurse here at Loma Linda, and she was on her way home, and she called the ambulance, helped me call my wife, and made sure that I got to Loma Linda.
And you'd never met her before?
Almost a good Samaritan passing by, huh?
No, absolutely was.
Always on duty. I love that.
And interestingly enough, from the point I woke up, I vividly remember everything until the point where I was knocked out after I was intubated. It took them a while to get me sedated after I was intubated, but I remember everything up to that point. I had a broken jaw, broken multiple pieces, and was communicating via text message. You can Apple Translate. You can type in what you want to say and say English to English and hit play, and it will say what you want to say.
So you were able to cognitively process that? You weren't in shock and intense pain?
Well, I think I was in shock, and that's how I was able to be so clear-headed, because I didn't realize how much pain I was in. I didn't feel any pain at that point, which was crazy. I felt that as I moved my jaw around that parts were not connected anymore. So I knew it was bad, and I knew that I was bleeding a lot to the point where when she tried to roll me over to my back because she was worried I might have a cervical spine injury, I started coughing because the blood was getting into my airway, and I had to kind of swat her off me, roll to the side, and spit the blood out. And then, then we were able to communicate a little bit more effectively after that, and told her I was a doctor and I kind of knew what I was doing too. And so we worked together. It was a team effort to get me safely on that ambulance.
How incredible. Do you feel like as a doctor, you sit there and you're like diagnosing yourself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was wondering, I was thinking about all the things that could be going wrong. I was a little worried about, an intracranial hemorrhage or a cervical spine injury, anything like that. So I was kind of holding my neck steady the whole time until I got a cervical C-spine collar on.
So you get to the emergency room. Mm-hmm. What happens then?
It was like a TV show, to be honest. We went into the trauma bay. I was communicating with Darcy Mainville and his resident at the time via text message and letting him know what was going on. And we were like debating what's the next step to do because they knew they needed a CT scan, but I was bleeding enough. I was suctioning myself continuously that it was going to be hard to get a CT scan without me bleeding.
You were suctioning yourself?
Yes. and communicating. One hand on the phone, one hand on the suction. So,
wow.
And, we said, okay, well, the bleeding seems to be slowing down a little bit. If I can lie flat for 5 minutes, that should be long enough to get a CT scan. And so we did a little test of that, and I was able to. So we were about to roll me to CT, and then surgery and anesthesia showed up, and they said, guys, he's going to need to be intubated for this surgery no matter what anyway. Let's just get this over with. And that was probably the scariest part of the entire time.
Sure.
I was just worried that I was going to have a tube in my throat, feel constantly like I was gagging, and be aware of that. And I have a pretty bad gag reflex. So that's kind of why we were trying to talk about how to do this without intubating me. But ultimately, the surgery and anesthesia team, who I know all of them already personally because I work with them on traumas, they talked me down. It was nice to be in a room with so many people that I knew.
And you trust and that
Exactly.
that
But
must be...
what a weird experience.
Yeah. Absolutely.
To be part of the planning team normally for a trauma, and then you yourself to now be the trauma patient.
Yeah, it's looking back at it. There's a reason that I wrote I think it's up to 8 pages now of that first day experience because it was just so incredible to be on, that side of things and to remember everything and to understand that patients that go through this go through a lot. There's a lot that's going through their head, a lot of fears. And
So you wake up after surgery. Then what?
I was flabbergasted with how normal I looked again. They handed me a mirror, and I had a lot of blood still on my face, and but it was me, and I was a little concerned going into surgery, that I would never look the same for my wife, and I didn't even want her to see me in the ER at first because I was worried that it would traumatize her. Because it was pretty gruesome. I woke up and I was happy. I looked normal. I was in a lot of pain, but, there's medication for that.
Wow. What a journey.
So we still don't know, whether a car was involved or not. We just know that I ran into a trailer, and that's the only thing that can really be proven. So it's been a hard process for me not knowing all the facts.
Of course.
And I never will. You kind of just have to get over it and move on.
How have you been able to do that? We all have varying degrees of traumatic experiences. That's easier said than done.
It is. I find myself getting into the trap of bringing it up and trying to talk about it with people more than I'd really like to. Because everybody asks you how you doing, how you feeling,
including me.
Yeah.
First question today.
Including us in this podcast.
Yep. But you have to, you focus on gratitude. I'd say is the number one thing. Be grateful that you're alive, that you're able to speak. Focus on all those things that you had to be grateful for, and it helps you put the the unknowns and the pain and the fear from before out of your mind.
The words that a physician chooses at particular moments in a patient's journey have tremendous impact, and that's always struck me to this day. You and myself and the careers that we have interface with people who are in really tough situations. And I was wondering if there were comments or things told to you as a patient just several months ago that may have impacted you moving forward.
Yeah, I I remember conversations with many of my partners and friends. My division director, Jason Smith, had come into the room because my wife had called his wife and said, he'll probably be able to get in before I can. Can you have him go in and check on him? And, he came into the room, and after getting over the shock of seeing me, because that was kind of scary, seeing his eyes kind of bug, he said, you're in good hands. There are good surgeons in the room, and I will make sure that your wife stays updated. And what do you want me to tell her? And that calmed me down to know that somebody who I cared about would be, taken care of, because I knew it was going to be a long night. My biggest fear, as I said, was that I would almost be locked in when I was intubated. And Ryan Lauer from anesthesia, talked me through it and let me know that what he was going to do step by step, and said, there's nobody we can't sedate, basically. We'll get you comfortable after we get this tube in. So those things really calmed me down.
Wow. And it was comforting to you to know that your wife was taken care of in that moment.
Absolutely. Because she wasn't allowed in the room. Obviously, it was a level 1 trauma or level A trauma. And, one of the things that I was concerned about was, how is she going to be, this is my face, she has to look at it every day. Is this going to traumatize her? And so I wanted to make sure that she was, prepped. I was texting her from the ambulance, letting her know, brace yourself, my face is really messed up. And I don't know, I was just super concerned about how she would respond. And interestingly enough, afterwards, if there was maybe one thing that we kind of disagreed about or almost fought about, it was after I woke up, she said, why didn't you let me just come into the room? She goes, I don't care how you look. I just want to make sure that you're all right. And so that was a good moment for me to realize, we're an unbreakable couple, I'd say.
The accident was in August. Have you been on the bike yet?
Yeah. I was back on the bike in my living room 8 days after the accident. So just to spin the legs out, you don't spend years building this kind of fitness to let it just slip away from you, especially when only your head was hit.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then when were you back out on the road?
No, you haven't been on the road yet.
So I was off work for 3 weeks from the accident, and I rode to work that day.
The first day you were back?
3 weeks from the accident.
3 weeks.
Was that sort of a defiant moment for you?
Yeah, obviously I was nervous. I didn't know if every car going past me was going to make me, lock up or have PTSD.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going to happen. I only live like a 7 to 10 minute commute, depending on how hard I'm pushing from work. And so I chose that as my first ride intentionally. I know it. I do it daily. No big deal.
That's awesome.
I was very lucky that it has not affected me. However, I have a therapist who's helping just to make sure that I don't have something that's going to pop up unexpectedly on the bike.
Sort of, you can knock me down, but you can't knock me out.
Absolutely. It's a part of who I am. I don't want that taken from me.
Yeah. The gratitude that you have coming out of an experience like this is pretty profound in my mind.
That has been the one overwhelming emotion that I had to focus on, especially the intubation process. Felt like I was going to the brink of death and back. And, now to be riding my bike with professionals again 2 months later is just kind of incredible. I don't know how else you can focus on anything else other than gratitude.
Well, it must be good to feel that burn in the legs, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. It does take your mind off of other things like the burn in your lips.
Well, Kyle, again, I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight on Evening Rounds.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.